The hum was faint at first, barely more than a whisper on the edge of human hearing. But it didn't go away. It kept growing, louder and more insistent, until the first scientists at Earth's top space observatories could no longer ignore it. At first, they thought it was a malfunction, maybe a glitch in one of the satellites or an error in the system. But when the signal repeated itself, echoing through the vastness of space, something started to feel wrong. Admiral Rachel Stone had been called into the operation the moment it was clear the signal wasn't just a mistake. She stared at the screens, watching the waveform grow with every passing second. The hum was a frequency, too precise to be natural. It was clear this wasn't just some cosmic anomaly. It was coming from somewhere. A source. Where is it coming from? Rachel's voice cut through the tense room, her eyes never leaving the screen. The team of scientists worked fast, calculating and recalculating, the room thick with uncertainty. Somewhere, deep out in the Sagittarius Arm, said Dr. Nathan Velasquez, one of the lead scientists. It's faint, but it's getting stronger. It's definitely not natural. Could it be another alien species? Rachel asked, already knowing the answer but not ready to accept it. The Earth had only just begun to make contact with distant civilizations, and most of them were still peaceful. No one had expected this kind of thing to happen so soon. But deep down, Rachel felt it. Something about this was different. This wasn't a friendly message. This was a warning. As the signal persisted, Earth's defense networks went on high alert. The signal wasn't just coming from deep space. It was aimed directly at Earth. Every expert Rachel consulted believed it was deliberate. The aliens, whoever they were, had sent this message for a reason. But what reason? The strange sound increased, and now, on every major news channel, experts began to discuss the anomaly. Speculation ran wild, but no one had any answers. Rachel Stone was growing increasingly frustrated. She had been in the military long enough to know that silence could be more dangerous than any weapon. The hum pulsed through the room, rhythmic, persistent. Then, something new happened. The signal began to shift, and for the first time, a distinct voice emerged from the background noise. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even clear at first. But there was no mistaking the message. It was alien. Strange sounds filled the room, a mixture of high-pitched tones and deep, rumbling growls. They didn't know the language, but the tone was unmistakable. It was threatening. Rachel stood frozen for a moment, staring at the screen. She knew this wasn't just a greeting. She could feel it in her bones. The threat was real. It had come from a place far beyond their own galaxy, a species far older and more dangerous than anything humanity had ever encountered. She turned to the team, her face hardening. "We need to decipher that signal," Rachel ordered. "Now." They worked through the night, trying to make sense of the alien message. Hours passed, and the more they studied it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a simple warning. It was a declaration. The aliens, whoever they were, had declared war. Finally, after hours of analysis, a breakthrough came. The team had managed to isolate a key part of the signal. The translation wasn't perfect, but it was enough to send chills through everyone in the room. Rachel looked at the screen as the words appeared, typed in imperfect English, but still legible. "You've angered the wrong species. We are coming to end you." A shiver ran down Rachel's spine. This wasn't just a war. This was something far darker. They weren't coming to negotiate or communicate. These aliens had already made up their minds. Earth was their target, and they had no intention of leaving anything behind. Rachel clenched her fists, trying to steady herself. The tension in the room was palpable. People were talking, making plans, but Rachel couldn't focus on anything other than the words on the screen. It felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. Earth had always been small in the grand scheme of the universe, but this message made it clear. They were not alone, and now they were in danger. She turned to the head of Earth's defense, General James Carter, who had been standing silently by her side. His face was grim, but his eyes showed the same determination she felt. "What's our move?" Rachel asked, trying to mask the fear creeping into her voice. "Prepare everything," Carter said, his voice low. "We need to mobilize Earth's fleets. We don't know when they'll arrive, but we need to be ready." Rachel nodded, swallowing her fear. "Get every resource we have, every weapon. We'll need it all." The rest of the team scrambled, working furiously, but in the back of Rachel's mind, one question gnawed at her. How could humanity stand a chance against a species that had already decided to wipe them out? The days that followed were filled with frantic preparations. The signal came again and again, its growl more menacing each time. Earth's military ramped up, but even with all their technology, Rachel felt something that she hadn't expected. Fear. They had no idea who these aliens were or what they could do. But one thing was clear: Earth had made a powerful enemy. And now, the countdown had begun. There would be no negotiation, no chance for peace. This was war, and humanity was about to face its darkest hour. In the cold silence of space, the signal continued, and as Earth prepared for the unknown, one thing was certain. The aliens were coming, and they weren't bringing peace. The days since the signal had arrived felt like an eternity. Every corner of Earth was on high alert. The peaceful hum of daily life had vanished, replaced by the frantic pulse of war. Humanity had never faced anything like this before, and the fear was palpable. People who had once believed that the universe was a place of wonder now realized how fragile their existence was. Admiral Rachel Stone stood at the command center, staring at the holographic map of Earth's defense networks. All across the globe, nations were working together in a way they never had before. It was as if the threat of extinction had united humanity in a way nothing else ever could. But for Rachel, this unity did little to ease the growing knot in her stomach. They were still too weak, too unprepared. "How's the fleet?" she asked, her voice low but commanding. General Carter, standing by her side, looked at the screen, his face grim. "We've managed to gather the best ships and crews, but, Admiral, we're outgunned. These aliens, they're not like anything we've ever seen before. They've been preparing for a long time." Rachel's gaze hardened. The alien signal had been a warning, but it had also been a declaration that Earth was weak, that humanity was insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but Earth was determined to prove them wrong. "The war machines are ready," Carter continued, "but I don't think they'll be enough." Rachel exhaled slowly. "Then we'll make them enough." She turned to her communications officer. "Send the order to activate all remaining defense systems. Tell every fleet to prepare for immediate engagement. We don't know when they'll arrive, but we're going to be ready." The officer nodded and began typing furiously. A few moments later, the room buzzed with activity as soldiers and technicians moved with urgency. Rachel knew this was their last chance. If the aliens had already committed to war, there would be no negotiation, no diplomacy. The only thing left was to fight. As the hours passed, Rachel found herself standing on the bridge of Earth's largest warship, the Eternal Flame. The ship was a massive beast, armed with enough firepower to wipe out entire fleets. It was Earth's last line of defense, a symbol of their strength, but also their desperation. The vast expanse of space stretched out before her, infinite and cold. Every second that passed felt like an eternity. The signal still echoed in her mind, a constant reminder of the enemy's presence. They were coming. The silence was broken by a sudden alert. "Admiral," the comms officer called, "we've detected something on the edge of the solar system. It's a massive fleet. They're here." Rachel's heart raced as she stepped closer to the screen. The images on the monitor showed dozens of unknown ships, dark and menacing, stretching across the vastness of space. They were unlike anything Earth had ever seen. No sleek designs, no brightly lit vessels. These ships were jagged, angular, and covered in what appeared to be some kind of dark material. something alien. They were here, and they weren't just passing through. They were heading straight for Earth. "Prepare to engage," Rachel said, her voice steady despite the rising tide of fear inside her. "All weapons systems online." "Admiral," a technician called out, "we're receiving another transmission. It's from their fleet. They're not speaking, but there's a message encoded in their signal." Rachel's mind raced. If the aliens were trying to communicate again, she needed to understand what they were planning. She gave a quick nod, signaling for the team to decode the transmission. Within moments, the message flashed onto the screen. "We are here. Earth will burn. There is no escape." The words were simple, but they held a chilling finality. The aliens weren't just threatening Earth. They were promising annihilation. Rachel clenched her fists, her jaw tightening. "Then we'll make sure they regret it." She turned to General Carter, who had joined her on the bridge. "Initiate the counterattack. Full force. Show them what happens when they mess with the wrong species." As the fleet moved into position, the magnitude of what was about to happen settled heavily on Rachel's shoulders. Earth had never fought an enemy this advanced, this determined. The war machines, Earth's most powerful ships, were their best chance, but Rachel knew they were underprepared. Still, she couldn't show weakness. She couldn't afford to. If Earth was going to survive, she had to make them believe humanity could win. In space, the alien fleet loomed closer, growing larger with every passing second. Rachel's heart pounded in her chest as the first salvo of weapons fired. It was the beginning of the most brutal battle humanity had ever faced. As the two fleets collided, the sky was filled with flashes of light, explosions ripping apart the cold vacuum of space. Earth's ships fought back with everything they had, firing plasma cannons, missiles, and energy beams. The enemy ships retaliated, unleashing weapons that seemed to tear through the very fabric of reality itself. The power disparity was undeniable. But Rachel Stone didn't flinch. She watched as Earth's fleet fired on the alien ships, each blast a message that humanity wasn't going to go down without a fight. The eternal flame roared forward, leading the charge. The battle was only beginning, but Rachel knew that this would be the fight of their lives. As the alien ships advanced, one thing became clear. Earth had just been thrust into the heart of a war unlike any it had ever known. The aliens were here, and they weren't leaving without a fight. The battle had begun in earnest, and it was everything Earth had feared, and more. The eternal flame surged forward, its massive engines pushing it through the chaos of space. The sleek and deadly warships of the enemy were relentless, their energy shields flashing with every hit. The sky, or what passed for sky in the vastness of space, had turned into a deadly firestorm. Admiral Rachel Stone stood at the command center, her eyes glued to the screen in front of her. The alien fleet had launched its first wave of attacks. Beams of destructive energy shot across the vacuum, tearing apart Earth's outer defenses. The enemy ships were unlike anything Earth had ever encountered. They moved with terrifying precision, and their weapons were powerful enough to tear through the hulls of Earth's strongest ships. "Report," Rachel barked, her voice steady despite the panic that threatened to rise within her. The communications officer was frantically typing, his face pale. "Admiral, we're losing ships. The Vanguard has taken critical damage. Shields are down, and they've been hit by a direct strike. They're not responding." Rachel's stomach churned. The Vanguard had been one of Earth's flagship vessels, and now it was disabled. The alien fleet was not holding back. They were here to destroy everything in their path. "Divert all available power to the eternal flame shields," Rachel ordered. "Get the Vanguard's last position. We can't let their sacrifice be in vain." The crew scrambled, but Rachel knew that the damage had already been done. Earth's defenses were crumbling. There was a chill in the air, a sense that this battle might not be winnable. But Rachel refused to give up. Another explosion rocked the bridge. A massive alien ship, its surface covered in jagged black armor, unleashed a barrage of missiles at the eternal flame. The ship shuddered as the impact hit, but the shields held for now. The Eternal Flame had the best defense technology Earth could offer, but it still wasn't enough to keep the enemies at bay forever. "Damage report," Rachel shouted, gripping the armrests of her seat as the ship bucked under another attack. "We've lost 2 engine sectors." The chief engineer's voice came over the intercom. "We can maintain speed, but we're starting to lose maneuverability. The alien fleet is closing in fast." "Damn it," Rachel muttered. She glanced at the tactical map of the battle. Earth's fleet was vastly outnumbered. The alien ships, massive, black, and intimidating, seemed endless, stretching across the stars like a sea of death. "We need to stop them now," General Carter said, his voice grim as he studied the holographic display. "If we let them push us back any further, we're done for. We need reinforcements, more ships, more firepower." "We don't have that luxury," Rachel replied, her tone hardening. "This is it. We stand or fall right here, right now." She turned to the helm officer. "Get us in close to their fleet. We need to hit them where it hurts." The helm officer hesitated. "Admiral, with all due respect, they're too strong. We can't sit back and wait to die." Rachel interrupted. "Do it. Get us close enough to use the last of our missile systems. We're not running away." The officer nodded and began to adjust course. As the Eternal Flame sliced through space, the alien ships grew larger in their viewports. The black behemoths were closing in, their weapons primed to fire. Rachel could feel the tension in the air. Everyone aboard knew this could be their last fight. Suddenly, a loud bang shook the Eternal Flame again. This time, the blast came from a different direction. The ship lurched, and a section of the bridge lights flickered. There was a scream from the back of the room, followed by a series of frantic shouts. The blast had hit the communication room. "Admiral, we've lost contact with the rest of the fleet," the comms officer reported, his voice shaking. "They're being overwhelmed. We're on our own." Rachel's heart sank. Earth's fleet was falling apart. The battle was becoming a slaughter. "Damn it, hold it together," Rachel snapped, her voice rising. "We are not going to give up. We will fight them until our last breath." She looked at General Carter, who had been silently watching the devastation unfold. "Is there anything left in the arsenal we haven't used?" Carter's eyes narrowed as he considered the question. "There's one thing. It's experimental. We haven't tested it yet. But if it works, it could be the turning point we need." Rachel looked him in the eye. "Do it. Whatever it takes." Carter nodded and turned to the weapons officer. "Initiate launch sequence for the Artemis cannons." The Artemis cannons were a last-ditch effort, a prototype weapon capable of firing a concentrated beam of dark energy. Earth scientists had worked tirelessly to develop it, but it had never been tested in battle. If it worked, it could deal massive damage to the alien ships. If it failed, they would lose the Eternal Flame and the battle for Earth. The countdown began. Firing in 5, 4, 3, 2. The tension in the room was unbearable. Everyone was holding their breath, praying for a miracle. Fire. The Artemis cannon discharged, and the sound of it was deafening. A massive pulse of dark energy shot forward, hitting the nearest alien ship. The results were immediate. The alien ship was consumed by the blast, its shields collapsing in an instant. The ship exploded in a fiery ball of energy, taking several more ships with it. For the first time since the battle began, Earth had struck back in a meaningful way. Rachel's heart raced, but the fight wasn't over. The alien fleet was still massive, and they were still closing in. However, the Artemis cannon had given Earth a glimmer of hope. But Rachel knew better than to get too comfortable. "We've just started this fight," she said, her voice steely. "Keep pushing. Don't stop until they know who they're dealing with." As Earth's remaining ships continued to fire, Rachel stared into the cold abyss of space. The war was far from over. The alien fleet was still coming. But for the first time, Earth had given them something to fear. The alien fleet's retaliatory strike came almost immediately, as though they had been waiting for Earth's brief moment of triumph. The once gleaming black warships, now bruised and burning, regrouped, quickly recovering from the devastating hit of the Artemis cannon. But that was only the beginning of the true test. Humanity had made its move, but the aliens were far from finished. They had a weapon of their own, one that made Earth's fleet look like an ant against a mighty boot. Admiral Rachel Stone stood on the bridge of the Eternal Flame, her knuckles white as she gripped the chair. The ship shook again as another alien strike hit their shields. The screen in front of her flickered, the images of the battle blurring with the chaos unfolding outside. Despite the brief victory they'd gained, the alien fleet was far from crumbling. Status report. Rachel barked, her voice tense and sharp. "We're holding," the communications officer replied, though his voice betrayed the strain he was under. "But the Artemis cannon can't fire again for another 20 minutes. We don't have that long." "We have no choice," Rachel muttered. "Keep the pressure on them. Keep them distracted until we can fire again." At that moment, the tactical officer called out, "Admiral, we have a new problem. The enemy is launching something big. It's a massive energy pulse. The readings are off the charts." Rachel's heart dropped. The aliens had been studying Earth's weapons, and now they were responding in kind. If their pulse was as powerful as it seemed, it could tear through the Eternal Flame's defenses and render their entire fleet defenseless. "Can we avoid it?" she asked, her voice more urgent than before. The officer's fingers flew over the console, but his answer was grim. "No, Admiral. The pulse is targeting everything in range. We're caught in its path." Rachel's mind raced. "Get us to the edge of the blast zone. Now." She barely had time to finish the command before the ship bucked under another blast. The bridge lights flickered once more, and the warning alarms blared. The Eternal Flame was caught in the alien ship's attack zone, and the blast was closing in fast. Rachel's stomach twisted. They didn't have much time. The ship shuddered again as the alien pulse reached its peak. The shockwave spread outward like a tidal wave, a pulse of raw, untamed energy that crushed everything in its path. The shields of the Eternal Flame flared brightly before they cracked, the energy surge overwhelming their defenses. For a moment, everything on the bridge went black. Then, an eerie silence fell. Rachel blinked, her eyes struggling to adjust to the sudden darkness. She could feel the ship listing to one side, its engines barely functioning. "Report," she demanded, her voice hoarse. She had to know if her crew had survived. "We're alive." "But barely," the engineer said, his voice cracking. "We've lost auxiliary power. Shields are down. Hull integrity is compromised. The ship is still floating, but we can't maneuver." "Damn it," Rachel growled, pounding her fist against the console. They were dead in space, sitting ducks for the alien fleet. It would only be a matter of time before they were finished off. "Admiral," General Carter said quietly, his voice steady but full of tension. "It's over, isn't it? We don't have the firepower. We can't outrun them. The alien fleet has us cornered." Rachel didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared at the screen, watching the alien ships still closing in, surrounding them like a pack of wolves. The enemy was methodical, their strategy flawless, and it was clear they were preparing for a final, decisive strike. But Rachel wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. "Give me everything we have left," she said, turning toward the weapons officer. "All remaining energy to the main cannons. We're going to take down as many of them as we can." The officer hesitated, then nodded. "Understood, Admiral." Rachel's heart raced, but she steeled herself. She couldn't give in to fear. Not now. Not when everything was on the line. "Prepare to fire," Rachel commanded, her voice calm but resolute. As the remaining power was channeled into the Eternal Flame's main cannons, the alien fleet drew closer, their dark silhouettes growing larger. The ship creaked under the strain, but there was no turning back now. Firing in 3, 2, 1. The Eternal Flame's cannons erupted with a roar, releasing a volley of high-energy shots. The beams cut through space, tearing into the nearest alien ships. A direct hit to one of the enemy's larger vessels caused it to explode in a blinding flash, sending debris scattering through the void. A brief victory, but it was short-lived. The remaining ships retaliated immediately. The Eternal Flame's hull shuddered violently as multiple explosions rocked the ship. The crew was thrown from their seats, and Rachel clung to the console as the ship bucked like a wounded animal. Another explosion. Another cry of alarms. They're breaking through the hull. Engineering reports massive structural damage. We've lost. But Rachel didn't hear the rest. She was focused on the view outside the viewport. Something was happening. In the distance, she saw something that hadn't been there before. A streak of light cutting across the stars, heading straight for them. "What is that?" she whispered, her breath catching in her throat. A ship. No, several ships were emerging from the shadows, their silhouettes impossible to miss. They were unlike anything Earth had ever seen, their massive frames glowing with dark, ominous energy. The ships were not alien at all. They were human. "General, what is that?" Rachel asked, turning toward Carter. Carter stared, his eyes wide with disbelief. "It's not possible." A voice crackled over the intercom, a voice that Rachel never thought she'd hear again. "This is Commander Gavin McAllister of the Vanguard. We're here to finish this." The rest of the crew stood in stunned silence as Earth's last hope arrived. Reinforcements. But Rachel knew this was just the beginning. The war was far from over, and Earth had one final chance to prove that no one, no matter how powerful, could defeat them. The alien ships loomed large on the screens, their weapon systems fully powered, ready to end the battle. Rachel Stone, gripping the armrests of her chair, felt the tremor in her hands. She had watched Earth's forces falter, and now, in the face of overwhelming odds, she felt the weight of every decision made up until this point. The odds were still against them, but now, with reinforcements arriving from the shadows, something new stirred within her. Hope. The voice of Commander Gavin McAllister crackled once more over the intercom. "Admiral, we're in position. We've got backup, but it's limited. We need to take down their command ship, and we need to do it fast." Rachel nodded, trying to focus. "Commander, you're clear to engage. I'll have the Eternal Flame provide support. Let's end this." "Understood, Admiral," McAllister responded, his voice firm. "All ships, move out." As the massive fleet of human warships, dark as a void in space, began to maneuver into formation, Rachel watched in awe. Each ship was a beast of war, and they were about to unleash a power the alien fleet had never seen. Earth was fighting back, not just to survive, but to show the galaxy that they had made a terrible mistake by underestimating humanity. The Vanguard led the charge, its dark silhouette cutting through space with deadly precision. Behind it, the fleet followed suit, opening fire on the alien ships in front of them. Explosions erupted, sending ripples of energy through the void. The sight was like watching a celestial storm, with Earth's wrath falling upon the alien invaders. As the battle raged on, Rachel's heart pounded in her chest. The Eternal Flame was still heavily damaged, but they had a job to do. She ordered all remaining power to the forward guns. It was a last-ditch effort, but it had to work. The alien fleet wasn't backing down, and neither were they. "Admiral, we're losing shields," the officer at the tactical station shouted. "The enemy is overwhelming us." Rachel didn't flinch. She had known this moment would come, and she wasn't going to let her crew die in vain. "Hold your ground," Rachel shouted. "We fight until the last." But even as she spoke, she knew the situation was dire. Their shields were almost gone. The Eternal Flame was hanging by a thread, and the alien fleet was closing in. This could be the end. But then, a miracle happened. From the depths of space, a new wave of reinforcements surged forward. It wasn't just Earth's ships. There were more. Ships from every corner of the galaxy, ships that humanity had helped in the past, now returned the favor. The very aliens who had once dismissed humanity as weak now saw the full power of Earth's influence. They were not alone anymore. Rachel's eyes widened as hundreds of ships, flying the banners of long-forgotten allies, opened fire on the alien fleet. They had come just in time. The battlefield became a chaotic mess of light and destruction as ships on both sides collided in a frenzy of energy. The alien ships that had once been so sure of their victory now found themselves surrounded on all sides. The tide of battle had turned. "Admiral," the tactical officer said, his voice trembling with disbelief, "it's working. The aliens are retreating." Rachel felt a strange rush of satisfaction, but there was no time to celebrate. The command ship was still intact, its dark hull unscarred. If they didn't take it down soon, all of this would be for nothing. "Target the command ship," Rachel ordered, her voice cold. "All remaining firepower now." The eternal flame's remaining cannons charged with a deafening hum. Outside, the alien fleet was in chaos, but the command ship remained a singular threat. Rachel's eyes locked onto the target as the cannon fired once more. The beam shot through space like a razor, cutting through the void and striking the heart of the alien command ship. For a moment, nothing happened, but then the ship's hull began to crack. The lights aboard flickered, and explosions rang out from within. The command ship was finally falling. "It's going down," the weapons officer said, his voice filled with awe. Rachel watched, breathless, as the alien command ship exploded, the shockwave cascading through the remaining fleet. The destruction was unimaginable. One by one, the alien ships that had been so sure of themselves now fell into chaos, their coordinated efforts dissolving in the face of Earth's relentless attack. The sound of victory was deafening, but Rachel knew this was only the beginning. There would be other battles, other enemies. But now, Earth had proven its strength, and anyone who dared to underestimate them again would pay the price. "Admiral," General Carter said, his voice shaking with the weight of everything that had just happened. "We've done it. We've won." Rachel felt a heavy sense of relief wash over her, but it was tinged with the realization that the universe would never forget this day. Humanity had gone from being helpless victims to the galaxy's most feared force. The story of Earth's wrath would spread across the stars, and every species would know, if you mess with humanity, you bring total annihilation. The screen in front of Rachel flickered one last time, showing the remnants of the alien fleet scattering, broken and defeated. Earth had won. But as the stars twinkled in the distance, Rachel couldn't help but wonder, who would be next to challenge humanity? The aftermath of the battle left the galaxy in stunned silence. Earth's fleet had decimated the alien invaders, but Rachel Stone knew that this victory was only a temporary respite. The victory celebrations were muted, overshadowed by the unsettling feeling that this was far from the end. The alien species they had just destroyed were only one of many, and more could be coming, others even more powerful. Rachel sat in the war room aboard the Eternal Flame, the ship that had seen the worst of the battle. The room, dimly lit and filled with the constant hum of electronic systems, buzzed with activity as officers worked to assess the damage. Their fleet had won, but the price had been steep. Ships had been lost, soldiers had died, and Earth's forces were stretched thin. But Rachel was not someone to dwell on defeat. She had always been about the next step. "Admiral," a voice cut through her thoughts. It was Commander McAllister, his face grave as he approached. "We've got a problem." Rachel straightened in her chair, feeling her heart rate pick up. "What is it?" He handed her a datapad, the image of a massive warship flickering across the screen. The size was unimaginable, even to someone who had seen countless fleets. But it wasn't the size that chilled Rachel. It was the markings on the ship. "This is the Dread King," McAllister explained. "The flagship of the Orsoth Empire. They're one of the oldest, most ruthless species in the galaxy, and they've taken notice of us." Rachel's mind raced. The Orsoth were legends, feared by everyone. Their empire spanned entire star systems, and their ships were practically invincible. Earth had just made a bold statement with their victory, but the Orsoth were no fools. They didn't take kindly to anyone challenging their dominance. "Do we have a chance?" Rachel asked, her voice steady, though she could feel the weight of the situation. McAllister hesitated for a moment before answering. "It's hard to say. Their fleet outnumbers us by 100 to 1, and their technology is centuries ahead of ours. But I know one thing. They're coming for us. And if we don't act fast, we'll be wiped out before we even get a chance to defend ourselves." Rachel turned away, staring at the star charts that displayed the galaxy's different sectors. The Orsoth were still far away, but their ships were fast. They would reach Earth within days, and when they did, it would be nothing short of annihilation. "We need to prepare," Rachel said, her voice firm. "We'll need every ship we have. Get in contact with the Federation. The others who stood by us. They need to be ready. Earth isn't going down without a fight." McAllister nodded. "I'll make the calls, Admiral." As he turned to leave, Rachel remained still, her gaze locked on the distant stars. The victory they had won was already fading in her mind. The Orsoth Empire was coming, and if they weren't ready, this would be the final battle. Days passed in a blur. The atmosphere on Earth was tense. People had begun to prepare for war, but even with their best efforts, there was no denying the magnitude of what was coming. The Orsoth had a reputation for being merciless, and Rachel knew they had little time. Earth had proven its strength once, but that wouldn't matter to the Orsoth. They would see this as a challenge, and they would not stop until they had crushed humanity. The first sign of the Orsoth fleet came in the form of a massive signal, their ships appearing out of nowhere, tearing through the galaxy with unmatched speed. There was no negotiation, no warning, just a cold, calculated approach to domination. The Orsoth were ruthless. Rachel paced the war room, her thoughts sharp. "Have we reached the other systems?" she asked, her voice cutting through the tension. "We've made contact with the Federation," McAllister replied. "And the Xylithian Alliance is mobilizing as well. They want to help, but they don't have much to offer. The Orsoth are too powerful." Rachel clenched her fists. She had hoped for a miracle. Earth was not alone, but neither was it enough. The weight of responsibility hung heavy on her shoulders. The galaxy's eyes were on them now. If they failed, it would be a message to every species. Humanity was weak, and it would be wiped from existence. "Then we do what we must," Rachel said, her voice unwavering. "If they want to see the true strength of humanity, then we'll show them. Earth will fight until its last breath." As Earth's fleet gathered in formation, readying for the inevitable clash, Rachel stood on the bridge of the eternal flame, staring out at the stars. A wave of emotion washed over her, fear, uncertainty, and determination. This was the moment she had been waiting for, but she knew that the cost could be unimaginable. The Orsoth were powerful, but they had never encountered humanity's wrath. The galaxy would soon learn that Earth was not a species to be underestimated. Rachel wasn't just fighting for Earth's survival, she was fighting for its place in the galaxy. Humanity's existence would no longer be dictated by fear, but by strength. As the Dread King appeared on the horizon, its massive form blocking out the stars, Rachel Stone made a vow. Earth would not go down without a fight. The eternal flame shuddered as the first waves of energy from the Dread King's weapons struck its shields. The battle had begun. The massive Orsoth warship loomed in the distance, its guns charging for another devastating barrage. Earth's fleet, though outnumbered, was preparing for the fight of their lives. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about sending a message to the galaxy. Rachel Stone stood firm, her eyes glued to the display in front of her. The Orsoth fleet had arrived, their ships massive and powerful. But humanity had something they didn't: a deep, burning desire to protect their home, their people, and their future. The Dread King was a symbol of everything humanity had fought against, an empire that saw others as nothing more than obstacles in their way. It was time to show them the price of underestimating humanity. "Admiral, we're taking fire." McAllister's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Shields are holding, but we won't be able to withstand much more of this." Rachel didn't flinch. She knew this was coming. She had trained for this moment her whole life. Humanity had always been underestimated, seen as weak or primitive, but that was about to change. "Hold steady," she barked. "Return fire. Full power to the main guns." The bridge erupted into a flurry of activity as the crew responded to her orders. A massive roar of energy filled the air as Earth's fleet retaliated, their weapons discharging in unison. It wasn't as powerful as the Orsov's weapons, but it was enough to send a message. The Orsov were not invincible. Humanity would fight back. Rachel's hands gripped the command chair tightly. The screens flashed with incoming data, showing massive explosions and ships being torn apart. Earth's forces were taking heavy losses, but they were also making an impact. The Orsov were not used to this kind of resistance. They were used to conquering planets without breaking a sweat, wiping out species without a second thought. But Earth wasn't going down like that. Another blast rocked the eternal flame, sending tremors through the ship. The lights flickered and alarms blared. But Rachel didn't hesitate. She knew what she had to do. "Activate the Omega Protocol," she shouted. "Prepare the dark matter cannons." McAllister's eyes widened. "Admiral, we're not ready." "We don't have time," Rachel interrupted. "This is our last chance. If we don't use everything we have, we'll be wiped out. We fight with everything we've got." The Omega Protocol was a last resort measure. It was a secret weapon, a technology that had been developed by Earth's top scientists. The dark matter cannons were still experimental, but they were humanity's trump card. If they worked, they could turn the tide of the battle. If they didn't, Earth's fleet would be nothing more than a footnote in the galaxy's history. With a deep breath, Rachel watched as the cannons powered up. The energy coursing through the eternal flame was almost too much to bear. But this was it. This was humanity's moment. Firing in 3, 2, 1. The ship shook as the dark matter cannons unleashed their power. The blast that erupted from the cannons was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. A wave of energy, dark and deadly, surged through the battlefield, swallowing everything in its path. The Orsov ships, massive and powerful, were ripped apart like paper in a fire. It was as if the universe itself had turned against them. Rachel watched in awe as the Dread King, the flagship of the Orsov Empire, was consumed by the wave of dark energy. It didn't stand a chance. The dark matter blast was too powerful, too destructive. Within moments, the Dread King exploded into a fiery ball of energy, its remains scattering across the stars. The rest of the Orsov fleet wasn't far behind. One by one, their ships were caught in the blast, their shields unable to hold against the overwhelming force. The sky above Earth, once dark and foreboding, was now lit with the fiery aftermath of the battle. But Rachel knew this wasn't over. The Orsov were not easily defeated. They would send reinforcements, regroup, and come back stronger. But for now, humanity had won, and the galaxy would never forget the price of underestimating Earth. In the aftermath of the battle, Earth's fleet stood victorious. But there were no cheers, no celebrations. The cost had been too great. Thousands of lives had been lost, ships had been destroyed, and the galaxy had been changed forever. Rachel stood on the bridge of the eternal flame, looking out at the remains of the Orsov fleet. The stars seemed quieter now, as if the universe itself was taking a moment of silence. Earth had proven itself, not just as a force to be reckoned with, but as a power that would not be silenced. "We did it," McAllister said quietly, standing beside her. Rachel nodded, her expression serious. "Yes, But this is just the beginning. We've sent a message, but we've also made enemies. And I have a feeling this war isn't over yet. As the remains of the Ursa fleet drifted in the distance, Rachel knew one thing for certain. Humanity had just taken its first step into the galaxy, and it would no longer be ignored. The universe would remember the day Earth brought total annihilation, and it would fear the consequences of ever messing with the wrong species again.